So here's my rough drawing of the wiring diagram. I don't expect you to be able to understand it, but I've determined that there are 2 wires for the electric fans, 1 wire for the air conditioning, and 4 wires basically for the sniper, 2 red and 2 blue. One's for the sniper unit itself. The other, I believe, is for the capacitive discharge ignition system that's part of the sniper. And then there's a wire that goes to the fuel pump. So I have drilled one of the plugs for the holes that can't seem to get it to show you the holes. There's a better way. So I've drilled one of the plugs for all the holes that need to go through the firewall. That's those. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wires need to go through the firewall. In addition to that, there are actually 3 wires for the air conditioner that need to go back there. One's a positive, and for some strange reason 2 grounds, but I don't understand that. So my battery compartment's going to be a busy place. So with all those wires, so we had 8 going through the firewall plus an additional 3. There's 11 wires. They're going to go from, let's say, the front of the dash to the battery compartment behind the seat. So what I've determined is that I want to run them. This is the in back of the seat. This is steel. And then there's the base, the tunnel for the transmission and drive shaft, basically. And then I'm going to come out here and run them along this side. Up. And then there's a hole up there. I'm hoping you can see it. You actually can see the wrong one. There's 2. Okay, so I think that's it right there. That's where all those 8 are coming through the firewall. So, in looking at this, sounded like it'd be easy to just go drill a hole right here and come across, because this is the console cover, and I'm going to measure it right now because I haven't measured it before, but I'll try to do this with holding the camera in my hand. So it looks to be about 3 inches from the inside of the console cover to this bracket for the bolt that holds it on, and it goes right through there. Okay, so you would think coming through this side and running it right up along here would be the best way to do it, but I'm going to try to get you a look at the back of that thing. There is a bracket back there, and if you go to the passenger side of that bolt, you're going to come out with the wires on this side of the bracket and have to loop them around this bracket. And don't forget, there's a liner to a storage compartment right here. I don't know how much room you would have, but there's probably enough, but it would be a pretty sharp bend. So I've determined that it's probably easier or better in the long run for me to drill the hole on the other side of that bracket over on the driver's side, which is what I'm going to attempt to show you now. Come on, camera, focus. Okay, so right about here. Now there is a rivet right there, but I think I can get a 3/4 inch hole right through there, and then maybe run the first part of the wires on the other side of the console and then loop them over here. Take them over these brackets and zip tie them to them because there's room to get a zip tie under there. And I don't want it under them because the screws that hold the console cover on may puncture the wires. That wouldn't be good. Since most of them are hot, only a few of them are ground. And then just run it up here. There's about 4 inches of clearance between here and here, so I feel I can run them over top of this and over there and up to where they come through. So I am going to start feeding some of those wires. Well, maybe I'll drill first. I'll drill that hole first. Okay, got a step drill bit. Hopefully it'll make fairly short work out of that hole. Don't know how good this bit is. Don't remember if I've ever used it before, so we'll see what happens. Going right between that rivet and that bolt hole. I'm going to go try to keep it kind of low. Let me take another quick look at how high I have available to me above that bolt hole. Looks that I can only go maybe an inch above that bolt hole. So I'm going to try to keep it low here. Apparently that drill bit's not all that sharp, but I've got a good start there. Wow, but I thought I'd been through that already. That rivet appears to just be holding a fiberglass piece in place. So I am not yet through the metal part. Should have brought my other drill down. This one's not that good. So I threw the metal to the point where I'm just trying to enlarge the hole. Take it up step by step. Okay, feels good where it's coming through, so that's a good thing. I can't get any pressure on that from the bad angle that I've got. Let's see if I can get in the car a bit. Generate some more pressure on it. On a step drill, you would think that the further up you go, the less it would have been used. Already. Let's take a look at what's going on the other side. Yeah, I think I'm running into part of the bracket. I may have to tilt this a little bit to get it to cut. This battery's dying on me already. Too lazy to walk up to the house to get the other drill. Maybe I can nurse this one along until I get it through. hot if I touch it. I'm tempted to touch it. Clean up those shavings a bit. And get to wiring. So the first wire I'm going to run, and there's a reason for it. When I made this for where they're going through the firewall, one of them actually goes from the inside of the passenger compartment to the engine compartment. That is the trigger wire for the air conditioning compressor. And so I'm going to run that one through the hole first. And since it's a different size, that'll give me kind of a reference point for where everything else was planned. So I'm just going to shove this wire up through the big old hole in the firewall. Move this as close as I can to where it's going to be. And then go up top to the engine compartment and pull that through. Trying to find a good place to set the camera. Those are the two holes. One you can see pretty good. That's the one I just brought this wire out. I'm going to try to keep all these new wires from being entangled in the rest of the wiring harnesses that I have. So this one's inside out. Go through like that, and I can pull the wire up. That's pretty much all the slack in it. Next thing that's happening is one of the wires for the fan relays, because I have that reference now, I can shove that through there, pull a good bit through, drop it down through the hole. And now before I do anything else, I'm going to make sure that on the inside that's not getting tangled up in a bunch of other wires. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to shove some more wire in, and I think the way I'm going to do this is just put enough to make it to the battery compartment with just a little bit to spare so that I don't end up being short, and leave the red wire that goes to the fan. That'll be the one I'll shorten. I'll have to come up with a good place to mount the relays, and that'll be part of the consideration. So I'm going to go double check that again. Okay, you can see this yellow wire. That's it in the battery compartment, and it's going to be long enough there because this has to get cut and added to it to connect the battery, because that's the fuse. Now what I'm going to do is, so that I can line these up along the back of the battery compartment, I'll cut one here, and for the other fan I'll cut it over here, and then that way they can be side by side, because the length will be different on each one. But I'll go wiggle that wire so you can see it. This is it right here. Add 6 inches to that. That will easily make it over to this battery terminal. I don't know which side is negative and which is positive, so I'm leaving them long enough that it will reach either side. Next thing I'm going to do is put in the second relay wire for the fan. But that just runs, back it out some, you can see the yellow wire, it stands out pretty good. It runs up along the console and up under the dash, and it goes out that hole. When I'm all done with this, I'm going to have some kind of sheathing around it. More than likely it will be the split coil loom that you can just slip over that, and I'll make sure that it goes into that hole back there far enough so that it protects the wires from any damage from that metal there. Even though it is pretty smooth, I did feel it with my finger after it cooled off. It is pretty smooth. Those are all the wires in the wiring harness that are on the relay for the fans that are not being connected yet. And I learned from my mistake. I unraveled that all the first time. I'm just going to pull the yellow wire out of here so that I can run it and leave the rest all coiled up so I don't have to retie it, because that was kind of a pain. So I'll get this all out of here and take the next step. So what I have here is the sniper harness. Got a relay that turns on your fuel pump, a fuse. This is the 7-pin connector, so I'll have to look at the chart to see where that goes, to see if I have enough length where I put this to get to where it needs to go. But basically, this fuel pump wire, for now I'm going to run it to in back of the seats, because I don't know how long the wire lead from the fuel pump is going to be. The rest of this stays under the engine compartment except for the red power and the black ground. So I am going to put that aside for now because, well, no, I don't have to. I was going to put it aside because this blue wire where I have the hole drilled for it, isn't going to match up where this goes through the firewall, so I'll have to wrap this under the engine compartment when it's all said and done. So I'm going to run the red and the black wires first. One at a time. These don't look like they're going to reach to the back. I'm going to have to extend those because, unlike most cars, which have the engine, the battery in the engine compartment, it's not the case with the Corvette. So I'm going to run the that red wire through and down into the passenger compartment. Move the harness over a little closer so I can get more of it in. I'm going to have to extend that wire. So, how much I don't know. Okay, black wire. And down into the engine compartment with it. I've got this all done and I'm ready to put this, my makeshift grommet in. I'm going to put some RTV around it. Make sure it doesn't pop out, because once it dries off, it will be a good connection. And it won't go anywhere. It won't wear on the wires. Right now I'm going to go on the inside of the car and pull those wires as far as I can. Okay, I'm going to have to add 4 or 5 feet of wire to each of those. I wish I was putting the fan relays in right now, because there is plenty of wire going to be left from those, but I really don't want to cut those before I'm 100% certain about where they're going. I don't want to come up short. So this wire is going to have to go as far as it needs to go to connect to the fuel pump. So I kind of have a plan for how I'm going to route that through the back compartment. It's going to go underneath the carpet in the back, and then, as luck would have it, the carpet's held on with 3 rubber grommets that happen to have a hole in the middle of them. So I'm just going to loop the wire above the carpet, bring it down, and run it under the, or through the grommet. And I may have just screwed up here because I wasn't paying attention to the factory harness. I don't want these being a mess of a tangle. Seen so many cases in fact on this car where people have put stuff in and not paid attention to where they were running the wires, and it's just a mess. And I want to avoid that. I know nobody will probably ever see it, because this car will be good for another 40, 50 years whenever I am done with it, but that's just how I want it done. Okay, 2 final wires to go through that firewall plug. They are from the capacitive discharge portion of the sniper system. Let me get these untangled. And I have 2 more holes in here. And these 2 also also look too short to go to the battery compartment. I don't know how much of this to leave out because it's got to plug into the capacitive discharge. And I don't want to have too much excess wiring hanging around, but on the other hand, I don't want to cut and splice it to make it short. This is my last hole in the plug for the firewall. I may have to get the air conditioner in and get this lined up. I think it's going to come to about here. I'm just going to try to temporarily push that in. See if it stays. Probably not going to. Definitely not with all those wires hanging through it. But to be honest, I don't know how that would have stayed in there by itself with or without wires. So it would appear that I have all those wires where they need to be for now, which is right there. When I'm done with it, it looks like it'll be a pretty neat installation, but like I said, I've got a lot more figuring out to do to determine whether or not I need to pull more through or bring it back this way. We shall see. Okay, so I had never used these before, but if you're at all into working on cars and such, you've probably seen these things advertised. What they are is a connector that has heat shrink tube on it and a low melting point solder in the center. And you're supposed to be able to just jam the wires together and heat it up and melt the solder, and it's joined forever. All the videos that I've seen have a nice little workbench, and they've got little clips holding the wires, and everything is pristine, if you will. Ideal conditions, let's say, for using these. Well, when you're working on a car, that is pretty much the reality. You don't have room to work. What I have there is my heat gun, a couple pieces of wire that need to be joined together, piece of metal to avoid heating up wires that I don't want to heat up. And maybe you noticed before I had my Kevlar sleeves on. I took them off because I washed my hands and I forgot to put them back on, but I did another project. I don't know if you can see it. I just accidentally bumped the heat gun with my wrist, and not too bad, but it did leave a bit of a burn. So today I'm smart. I'm wearing the Kevlar, and I'm putting a pair of mechanics gloves on when I turn the heat on. But let me try and demonstrate, and hopefully I can get this on the video, because I can't be holding the camera and doing this all at the same time. But what I've got already, kind of make room for me to sit halfway comfortably or kneel. What I've got already is one of those connectors on a wire. This is a big silicon coated wire. It just fits in. And the idea is to take this other wire and just ram it in there together. Hopefully you can see that. But you ram it in there together so that it's kind of physically connected. And then you slide this over the joint, and then it just came apart. The wires came apart. Those need to be together to be joined. Can't have too much stripped off, otherwise it'll be beyond the heat shrink. And I'm trying to put it on this thicker wire first, because Sniper wants you to use a thicker wire than they provide for the power if you have to extend it. So I'm trying to do a 10 gauge. And I'm not sure what gauge the one is that Sniper had. So I'm going to push that up so that it's under the solder piece and try to ram this other wire in. Needless to say, this isn't going too well. Seems like you need a bigger piece of wire, or bigger connector than the wires you're working with. And then you could do a Western Union splice, which I saw, which really made sense. But as of right now, I'm having difficulty getting a 10 gauge and probably a 12 to join. Okay, I'm ready to apply heat to it. Hopefully it doesn't fall apart in the middle of the heating process. I think the heat gun's probably going to block your view. Let's see, maybe we can spin it around. I'm putting gloves on so that if I touch it, I don't burn myself. Okay, this heat gun has a reflector on it that's supposed to reflect the heat back to the other side, so maybe it'll work. The wires get soft, and if they touch the heat gun, it sticks to the heat gun. I'll leave that cool while it looks like it melted, but I want to pull on it while it's still soft, or it will pull out. I was doing that yesterday with smaller wires on a different project that I didn't record, and it seemed like it wasn't melting. Let's zoom in on that guy. It looks like it's soldered underneath there. Let that cool for a couple minutes, and then I'll give a tug on it and see if I think that's good enough. And I can also flip it around and check out what the other side looks like. But I don't want to handle it too early. Okay, I'm getting ready to take a look at it from the other side. Now that feels like a pretty solid connection. Let's repeat it for the ground wire. Ground wire on this is just a wee bit thinner. Trying to make sure that I'm going to be able to put this in the frame. Ground wire. I have my black wire. I have my thing pushed over it already. Try this again. See how it works the second time. That. Pull that. And this is, I'm saying this isn't the ideal conditions This is actually pretty good for working on a car. Let's see if we can do this again. What I think is happening, and maybe it's just a learning curve, but it would appear to me that I'm expecting to see a bright silver color on the whole tube whenever the solder melts. But I think that basically the tube retains the color that the solder was prior to it melting. You can see there's kind of a gray in the middle there, but to the left it looks shiny. And maybe that's just a learning curve, that it's not really going to change the color of that strip in the middle where the solder sits. So I'm going to unravel the, they call it red, it looks more pink to me, wire, and run it to the battery compartment, because I need the rest of it to extend the other piece from the sniper system. The piece I need to extend is that for this capacitive discharge ignition module. I'm on the wrong wires here. Take a look at the back side of it. It actually feels like it's a good joint as well. Okay, I'm gonna go shut off the camera while I go cut off. I'll thread the ground wire all the way to the back. I don't know when that lost focus. Okay, I've got the red wire fed through. I have to unwrap the black ground wire, feed that through, and then I have to cut them off because those are the pieces I'm using for the other 2 wires that I have to solder. Pull that through. Go around and cut it. Turn off the video while I do that. So there's the semi-finished product on the inside. Like I said, I may wrap that in a loom, but basically it's going to go back here, up over here, under the console, behind the air conditioning, and everything ought to be good. I think the next thing I can do is actually start to install some of the stuff underneath the dash for the air conditioning. But, well, before I do that, I think I need to decide whether I'm going to put a relay for the air conditioner trigger and the transmission trigger, because that one thin wire bothers me a bit. We'll see. So I'm getting down to the last couple things that need to go through the firewall. I talked before about possibly putting a wire directly to the battery for a ground, and then putting a contact block that I can screw ground wires into under the hood. So that's one thing, but I don't have the wire for that right now. The other things that are getting attached, I'm putting the control unit under the hood, so these wires go to the transmission. Well, actually one goes to the transmission. This one goes to the transmission. It's got 3 or 4 connectors on it. We've got a transfer case connector, which I'm not going to be using since I don't have a 4-wheel drive. Transmission output speed sensor, that goes on the transmission somewhere. This is the main harness for the transmission, or the main plug. And then there's a transmission input speed sensor that goes into the transmission. And the other thing that stays under the hood is the throttle position sensor. I've got an extra little lead on here because one is going to go to the transmission, and one is going to go to the throttle position sensor on the sniper. Now, it would be kind of cool if I could identify where this plug goes. because for the transmission, because I didn't see another cable for that. Maybe I'm missing a cable still. Not missing it, but in the box. But the thing that has to go into the passenger compartment is this one cable. It's got several wires inside it, and I already have, this is the tack-in wire, the brown one, and I'm going to connect that under the hood. So I've already pulled it partially out of the harness so that I can connect that under the hood and not have to run it back through the firewall. Then the leads I have on that cable that's going in are a hot wire for ignition on and running, a ground wire, and then you get into, there's a speedometer out. If you have an electronic speedometer, you would use that. I don't. It's got a cable. There is a mode switch, this blue wire, and the mode is a button to press. You can have different programs in your transmission for shift points, etc. And you can press that button once and switch modes. There's two modes. And then there's a mode LED, which just lights up the switch. So all that has to go into the passenger compartment from the engine bay. I'm going to get this out of the way. And there's one more thing that I have to get for the air conditioner, vintage air. And that is the shut-off switch that turns the heater water flow off when you turn the air conditioner on. Okay, so that's the switch. It has to be mounted this way, and there is the lead that gets plugged into. That's about 14 inches long. And then there's this lead, which plugs into the air conditioner on the inside and plugs into this heater control switch somewhere under the engine compartment. There's a total of about 50 inches between the lead from the actual valve and the lead from the air conditioner. So I have to make sure that heater control, or the heater control switch is within 50 inches as the wire runs. So I'm going to have to check that out and see if this can go through the same hole in the firewall that the transmission control cable goes through. In order to do that, I'm going to have to find out where on the air conditioning unit this plug sits, because that's going to determine how far I can go from the existing hole, how much wire I need to run. I would like to put this as far away from the heater as I can. Two reasons. Number one, I think I might be able to make it more accessible if I can get it you know, to a certain point, maybe on the wheel well or something like that, in case it needs replaced. And then number two, I think just the heat transfer through the valve and through the fluid that's going to be in there, even though it's shut off. There's going to be fluid on both sides of that, and I think the heat will conduct somewhat. So the further I get that away, the less heat conduction there will be to the heater core. I don't know that that's a big deal, but I'm going to do it anyway. The other consideration is on this lead that goes from the air conditioner to that valve. Whatever hole I make in either the firewall or the plug that I'm planning on putting the transmission cable through has to be big enough to accept that plug. And I guess I should measure that. So that plug looks to be about 1/2 inch. Probably have trouble reading that, but trust me, it's a 1/2 inch. I may be able to make a slightly smaller hole in the plug and put slits on either side of the hole to just get this through temporarily, and then have it be a smaller hole in the plug. Okay, I've been working on the other plug for the few more wires that need to go through the firewall to the passenger compartment. So this, if you recall, is the heater core shut off. What I did is I made a small hole for these two wires and a big hole for this wire for the transmission. And what I did is I cut a slit between those two holes so that I could just push this up through and get it past the ground wire. This is going from the inside to the engine compartment. So that gets me with this in here, and I just slip those two wires through that groove into the little hole. And when all's said and done, I'll put a little bit of RTV around here to hold that together and seal it up. So this is the part that's in the engine compartment now. The two power wires for it and the ground. Then the transmission cable goes in that bigger hole. And we're going to start with the two longest ones, which are the 12-volt lead and the ground. And then all these other ones, mostly having to do with the mode switch, and there's one that I'm not going to use for computerized cars. I'm going to kind of wrap these labels on the wires tightly around the wires and get it up on the cable. So that's ready. All I need now is I want to put a good ground up in the front, and I've drilled a hole for it. So all I need to do is run the wire from the battery compartment out through the firewall and then run it through this hole. But I guess since I've got this far, I could actually drop these two things into the passenger compartment through that big hole. Okay, I'm ready to drop the transmission control cable and the heater shut-off valve wires in through to the passenger compartment. I can do that because the other one will come out of the same hole. So this is all the stuff that needs to go get connected inside, and I'm steering clear of these other cables so that they're not intertwined. And when I get the ground cable, I will connect it up, push it out through this hole, and once I've got it out through that hole, push it through the hole in my grommet. Hopefully I have the right size. It's the size I used yesterday. I still have my tack wire here. It's going to connect up to the tack wire here, and the tack wire from the sniper. This will connect to the heater shut-off valve, and this will just get plugged in there and sealed. We'll have as neat an installation as can be humanly expected with all these wires. Now what I will do is I will get some of this, I don't see any here in the engine compartment, but some of the cable sheathing, and wrap the ones of these that I can together, put them in a sheath, make it look halfway decent. I'll buy a couple different sizes of sheathing so that I can get, a lot of wires where necessary, a few wires where necessary, whatever it takes. And probably will end up needing a bunch of cable ties to tie those sheathings. Up where they'll look halfway decent. But that for now I think is about all I can do until I get the my ground wire run, because I do want to have that. The problem with these Corvettes is everything up here is plastic and fiberglass, and it's hard to find a good ground. So if I run a cable from my battery up to a block, and I probably will use just what's used in a house wiring situation. If I can find the darn thing, I guess I have to put it away with all my parts. But it's what you would use in a service panel for your housing electric. It's just a series of screws that you can put wires under and screw them down tight and get a good ground. So I am going to do that to make sure that I have a place to ground everything I'm putting in now, and any future electrical items that need a good ground can just run a wire straight to that strip, bolt it in there, and you'll have a good ground straight back to the battery. So that is what's left of a screw that holds the rocker panel on. It's in a little there's a little see right there. It's a threaded insert that the screw screws into, and if you've been following along with this whole project, you'll know that all three of them broke off on this side as I was trying to remove them, and two of them I was able to weld enough of a stub on to get them out. I gave up on this one. I guess it was getting late in the day or whatever, and there's still a stub there. I'm going to try to grab it with vice grips. I don't know if I did this before. I probably did. But I'm going to try to grab it with vice grips. See if I can turn it out. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I think I'm going to have to drill it out. But trust me, it will come out. One way or another. I don't think I'm turning the screw. I think I'm just eating away at the piece of weld that I managed to get on the tip of the screw. Now the problem I might have is I tried welding from the back side as well as this side. I might have excess weld on the other side as well. So even if I get it to turn, I may not get it out. There we go. Broke off the weld. So that makes my decision for me. We're going to be drilling, but at least now I have a somewhat concave place to put my drill bit. So I'm going to start with the very smallest drill bit I have. Hopefully I can get it centered in there. Kind of want to walk a little bit. This bit is so small for drilling in steel. Wouldn't surprise me if I break it and have to step up to the next size. Trying to guide it over to get it more centered, because it did walk just a little bit. Okay, let's try the bigger bit. Got this thing as far in the chuck as it will go, so as to minimize the flex on the bit. Not quite centered. Now, it's not the end of the world, because you can get your finger back there, I believe, even with the rocker panel on, and put a nut behind it. Out of curiosity, I'm going to see. Yeah, my bit is not long enough to go through, at least the way it's chucked in there now. Not long enough to go through all the way. Uh-oh, now I've created myself a problem. I broke my bit. That never ends well. So I've been beating on it with a chisel and a hammer. And I think it's starting to move. And by it, I mean the entire piece that the screw had threaded into. I don't feel it on the back side. Yeah, I do feel it coming away from the back side finally. So I think it's going to punch out of there and I'll be able to replace it. Yep, the hole is nice and clean. So this is what it looks like. It has a shaft here. It's threaded. I'll have to see if I can acquire one of those. If not, as I said, I'm pretty certain that I could hold a nut there and get the screw started. And that would hold it on, but okay, that job's done for now because I have nothing to repair it with. Just zoom in on that hole. It's nice and clean, other than this is from the flux from the welder, the kind of brownish gray stuff. But the hole's nice and clean. I'll be able to work with that. Okay, so we've got some more wire here. As I was saying, I want to add two things. I want to add a hot wire to a relay that's triggered when the ignition switch is on, that will power the air conditioner, the transmission, and I think that's it. I also want to add a ground wire, since this is a fiberglass body. I don't want to try to find grounds. They're difficult to find sometimes, so I'm going to set up a situation where I have ground wires that are connected directly to the battery that I can use. So hopefully these two wires will fit in this hole that I've drilled. I have to do them one at a time. One red for the relay and one black for the ground. And I've separated all the wires that I've already got pushed into this hole by which ones need power, which ones need ground. So I think I added a little bit of a grommet here that just slips over the wires. I'm going to take that out. That'll make it easier to run these two wires. And then once I've got them run, I'll put the grommet back in. That'll hold them tight. So there's the power wire that is going to go to the relay. And here is the wire I'm going to use for a ground. I've got some nice little devices there to help me wire those. I'll show you those in a second. But okay, those wires have been inserted through the holes. Let's see if I can get them into the grommet, and the grommet into the hole that I've drilled through this metal panel here. It's actually a metal panel, but it's backed by fiberglass, so the actual hole through the metal is very, very smooth. I was very impressed with how smooth it was, so I don't think it would cut wires anyway. But if I can get this little grommet forced in there, I would guarantee it. Yep, it's going in. I might have to get a little screwdriver and push on that a bit, because my fingernail's a little bit too weak. Make sure I've not got these too tangled. So these are all my wires that need to go to the negative terminal, and then I've got all my wires over here that need positive power. And take this off real quick. I'm going to get a dual terminal battery so that I have the side terminals that come with the original with the car. It had a side terminal battery, so I'll hook the battery cables that were in there to that, and that'll give me power to the main part of the cars. And then all this extraneous stuff I'm adding on the top terminal, I will put this cable connector, put all my my circle connectors that I need to hook to hot wires. If I can find one over here. I've got to test the size anyway. This looks like it's too small, but I'm going to get these types of connectors to put on there. I'll put them all on, screw them down with this wing nut, and I'll have a good connection to the battery for everything that goes to it. And that includes my sniper system, it includes the electric fans, it includes the air conditioning, vintage air, plus my extra wire that's going to trigger a mini fuse box that I bought. I'll hide that under the dash somewhere. And as far as I know right now, I only need 2 power takeoffs for here. So there's 2 fuses are going to be added. And I'll wire the hot wire to here, right out of the relay. And then I can take these, and keep in mind that that relay won't allow power to come here until the ignition switch is on, because that will be wired to the ignition, and it will cause the relay to close and provide power to this whole box. And then by extension, it will provide power to the air conditioner and power to, what else did I have inside that needed power? Oh, the transmission. It has a power takeoff for the transmission, so I'll put appropriate sized fuses in there. For the ground wire that I've planned, I got 3 of these grounding blocks. So I will connect one of these to the battery, and then there's a couple things that are supposed to be grounded to the back there for the air conditioner. But this is a very solid grounding block, so no concerns with the amount of power it will conduct. And I can use one end, like I said, one end goes to the battery. The other end I will take to the ground that I'm going to mount one of these under the dash and one of these under the hood. And I'll just string them along. The one under the dash, the one under the dash will get the power from the wire that comes out of the one near the battery. And then on this one, it will put power out, or ground out, I should say, not power. It'll provide ground out for the wire that I'm going to put one of these under the hood. I'll connect it up to here, and then I have 3 places where I can ground things under the hood. And that will make it easier because, as I said, with the fiberglass body, sometimes getting a good ground is hard. So the other thing I'm going to do is several of these things need to be fused. So I have these inline fuses that I plan to mount them like that. Even though they'll be wired individually, I'm going to put them side by side like that, put them up against the back side of the battery box so that they'll be easy to access. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to cut these at different lengths and make sure I have enough. I may have to add wire to get to the positive terminal on the battery, but such is life. I'll do what I have to do to make it the way I want it. So I am going to not bother you with watching me crimp and heat shrink, and a couple of them I may need to do one of those solder connectors, the heat activated solder, so that I get a good signal. The one I'm mainly concerned with is Sniper, because they say that most of the problems that people have with them are because of poor connections in the wiring. It can be a poor power input, or it can be a poor ground, so that's why I'm doing all this. But I will get that set up, and then I'll show you what I've done. I'm going to use a blunt nut driver to push that grommet into place. I don't want to use something that I can pierce any of those wires with, because I've got grounds and what will be live wires all running through that grommet, and don't want to nick any of them up. Nice fit on the grommet. That will keep those wires from being damaged in any way. So the air conditioning from Vintage Air has a circuit breaker right here that they tell you to mount as close as possible to the battery. However, I'll give you enough wire, or they hardwired it in where it's nowhere near close to the battery. So I am going to double protect that. See if I can aim the camera at that circuit breaker that I was showing you. There it is there. That's up by the transmission shifter. So just using this would leave all this wire back to the battery unprotected. So I think what I'm going to do is put another one of these that I bought a bunch of in line with that at the battery and double protect that wire in a properly operating system. You know, it's not going to blow the circuits, blow the fuses or anything like that. So I am going to start to do that, and maybe I'll be back to show you a little bit of the crimping and soldering process if I use the solder connectors, but I've already showed that in another video. But I have heat shrink crimp connectors, which they require a special tool, which the difference appears to be these are much more rounded, or flat, I should say. Crimping areas, and I have this one here. When you put it in there, it will actually crimp it flat without piercing the heat shrink and having potential for a short. So I might show you those when I use them. So what I've determined by looking at the console is that the place where I'm going to have the most height under the console to clear that breaker for the air conditioner is going to be directly across from the shift lever when it's in park. So I'm going to put this in park. Actually, I'm not putting it in anything because the transmission's not connected. But as I said, I've determined that this looks to be the best position for it. So I've got a self-tapping screw that should drill into this transmission tunnel. Lip there that's making this difficult. Might have to get a drill bit and pre-drill it because I'm having trouble holding the screws. And the relay. Getting the drill on it. A lot to do here. I don't move this too far forward in order to try and make it hit, because I don't want to be running into the ashtray that's in that console. what, instead of trying to mess with that, I'm gonna go get me a drill bit, drill a pilot hole. That will be easier because I only have to hold the drill and the breaker instead of the drill, the breaker, and the screw. Okay, just want to get a pilot hole with the drill. Then I'll put the screw in without the breaker. Then I'll take it out, and because the screw is going to be a little bit bigger than this pilot hole. So okay, I've got it marked. The pilot hole. Get my screwdriver bit in. That seems to have made it much easier. Now I'll get the drill set to drive it in again instead of back it out. The screw lined up with the hole. Bit in the screw. Repeat that process for the other side, and I don't have another screw with me, but I can pre-drill the hole while I'm here. Okay. I'll go get my screwdriver bit, and I'm sorry, not my screwdriver bit, but a screw to get in there. I won't need to put this in without the breaker being in there this time, because I've already got everything else lined up, and I still only have to hold that screw and the bit, the drill. I should be able to drive that in with no problem. Now, once I've got this in place, I can kind of accurately gauge how long that wire needs to be to hook it up to the battery terminal. So I'm going to do that. Set that up. That's the wire for the air conditioner. That will be my next thing. And I don't, as I said, I don't think I'm going to record all this because it'll be just a bunch of tedious, repetitive work to crimp those wires on and heat shrink them, and it's just not worth the video time, my time or yours. So there's one of the heat shrink connectors already crimped on. I was going to show it to you, and I told you what I was doing and all that stuff, and when I was done I realized I didn't have the camera running. So at any rate, about 1/3 of an inch stripped on, inserted into the connector. That looks like a really nice solid connection. Once I shrink that down, it's going to be great. So I will take this over to the other side, and I'm not going to bother showing a heat gun shrinking the tube, and that's not very exciting. So I'm going to proceed with my project. So I'm going to show you what a couple of hours of work got me here. I'll try to position this camera so that you can see what I'm going to do with it. But basically I've got a bunch of inline fuses wired in. They're all going to go to the positive terminal on the battery. So there's the battery. That'll be tightened a little more when I put it on, but hopefully you can see the contrast here. I've got fan 1, fan 2, air conditioning, sniper, and then my relay for taking the power off the ignition. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple of cable clamps and put this mounted up against the wall in the battery compartment. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to see where I want to mount it before I, once I have my battery and all that, I'll figure that out. I'll basically anchor it so it doesn't bounce around too much. And below that's where I'm going to run my ground wires, but it's getting kind of late in the afternoon and I need to clean up the shop. Get ready to have Labor Day weekend. But so far I guess I'm satisfied with it. I wish it could have been a little neater, but it's hard to get all those wires neat. It's just tough to work with, especially when you're in kind of cramped quarters. So I don't know if this is going to be a separate video on YouTube or whatever, but that's basically what I did. I arranged those inline fuses so that they were not right next to each other, so that I could stagger them out like that. I'll lift that up one more time just just to make sure I get a good shot of it. But that's going to be it. That's going to go up against that wall, mounted with cable clamps, basically. Don't know what size I'll need yet, but it will be basically something like this. I'll just hang that on the wall around some of the wires on the front, beginning and the end of that string of fuses, and it'll keep them nice and organized and out of the way. So we're looking at the battery compartment. I've got all those fuses in a line, and trying to get them anchored up out of the way so that when I have to replace a battery, they won't be in the way. So that little pre-existing circuit breaker was kind of in the way of where I wanted to put these things. Not so much the circuit breaker, but the wires. So I figured out that if I just loosened that and turned both of these wires around to the other side, that would give me exactly the room I need. Plus it would allow this wire to go inside the battery compartment here, out of the way of the battery. So that is the way I'm going to move those wires. Now that wire, it goes to underneath the driver's seat. I think it might have been for a power seat, but there wasn't a power seat in here whenever I bought it, so it actually seats from a 77 or above car. So now that gives me a little bit of room to hopefully get this anchor around all these wires. And hopefully be able to just screw it in. So that the fuses are accessible, and we can take it from there. Have to get a screw and a nut driver to put it in, but so it'll be a minute before I turn it back on. So I've shown this technique on another video, I'm sure, but not everybody watches every video, I'm sure, so this is what I've done. I've taken a screw with a 1/4-inch head on it, but it fits in too loose and you can't get it into the area where you need it. You can't get both hands in there, well, one hand to hold it and one to use the drill driver. So just wrap the head of the screw in that paper towel and jam it in there. That way it doesn't fall out, and I can run the screw in, hopefully. And the paper will fall out when I take the socket off the head of the screw. If it doesn't, it's on the paper. I can peel it off a little bit. So we're going to try to anchor that in there. Hopefully this gun fits. I did not test that. I just bumped that screw pretty good so it didn't fall out. Screw through the clip. Pulled it out. Might need another piece of paper since I pulled that out a couple times. Hard to get an angle with the my plan's not working all that well. Let me try a different tactic. Get the screw started first. Have the head of the hole tapped, if you will, and then add the clip and the cables. I've lost my paper. So I've got a mark there. Bouncing out of my, hope I'm not in the way of the camera. It's bouncing out of my socket, and I've lost the paper. If this was wood, that would be going right in. Fiberglass is harder. Okay, if that's not going to work, I'll drill a pilot hole with a drill. Okay, let's see if we can get a pilot hole with the drill, and then put the screw in with the drill driver. If I can find the screw, I don't know where I put it. I should pay more attention. So this is a close fit. Screw. There it is. Again, putting a little piece of new paper towel in there. sure my arm is in the way. That screw through the little holder. There. Well, I am going to be able to put another one in here somewhere to hold it. It looks like I'm going to have to pull some of these wires back the other direction because looks like I had more length there than I needed. That will fit nicely to the battery terminal, and then I'll tighten that down. I also have to add one other thing to that. I have a battery tender that needs to go to the positive, and then of course it has to be grounded. That should keep those up out of the way. I'll just pull them through to get rid of some of this excess, unless I can just tuck it down there. Maybe that's a better idea rather than trying to pull it back, because if I try to pull it back and then I need to work on this, I can't pull it out very far. If I need to work on it and I have that slack, I can undo those, the connector, this here, and I can pull it out where I can work on it easily. So I may or may not add another clip here. It doesn't look like I really need it, but that might be it for the power carrying wires. Now I have to put in a ground. So I bought these grounding blocks, and they give you screws to mount them with. Check this out. That's all the further they stick out once they're screwed in. I'm going to try to use them and see how sturdy it is, but I'm not sure whether I really want to use those. They're a Phillips head screw, so first thing I'm going to do is try to figure out whether I want to mount this grounding block above or below the fuses. Part of me says I'd like to have it below, and part of me says I'd like to have it above. But I want to mount it somewhere like there. So first thing I've got to do is drill a pilot hole, which is going to be difficult to do because of the length of the drill plus the bit. See if I can tuck the bit further in the drill. Okay. that will be okay. And I know you can't see this. I think that'll be okay because okay, let's drill the pilot. Get the Phillips head bit on the impact driver. Impact driver is a little shorter than the drill, so it fits in there a little better. Let's see if I can line that screw up with the hole. That started it. I have to make another hole for the other side. First I'm going to get it through there and get it started, just marked. Drop the screw over here before. Appears to have gone down where the seatbelt cover is. I think I can get it with a magnet. So far, not any luck on that. So I may need to take that cover off to fish it out if I can't find it on top of it, inside that passenger compartment. While I search, I'm going to shut the camera off. So I'm going to take off that seatbelt cover because I can't see the screw I dropped, and I really don't want it in there. It could potentially get ingested into the retracting mechanism, or maybe tear up the seat belt. So I do not want that to happen. I believe that's an 8mm. Not holding them on. And you have to put the 8mm on the tool if you want to use it. Looks like there are 4 screws holding it on. It's down there. I couldn't reach it with the magnet. Looks like my seatbelt's already frayed a little bit. I'm going to clean that out a little bit and put that cover back on. Well, maybe I won't screw it in just yet while I'm working over here in case I drop something else. I'm going to clean out that cavity there a little bit. So I was never going to get this screw out of there because it's stainless steel and it's not magnetic. I tested it on the magnet after I fished it out. So sometimes the magnetic retrievers work. Sometimes they don't. So I gotta get set back up with a Phillips driver. Okay, by the way, these grounding blocks, the screws are not connected to it. So the screws are not going to provide any kind of a ground. You have to provide them by themselves. That's going to be pretty tight. The fiberglass is pretty strong. Yeah, that's a pretty good grip on there. So now what I'll do is I'll take all of these ground wires and I will put ring connectors on them and put them under these screws, these nuts. What I will do is the one that's going to be for a ground, my ground that I've been putting in, and I'll have to find it because that's not it. And this is probably it right here. Yeah, that's it. So that one I will attach to the end. The other end I will attach to the battery terminal, this one. And I will attach the things from Sniper that want to be grounded to the battery directly to here. So they won't be connected to this grounding block. And then the wire that I connect to this end that goes forward, I'll put another grounding block up front and then one in the engine compartment, and I'll always be able to access a good ground no matter where in the car I am. So pretty much the process from here on in is what I have showed you before, just adding electrical connectors and screwing them down. So I don't think I'm going to video all that. I can listen to some music while I'm working, because YouTube cites you for copyright violations if you have music playing in the background. But if there's something unique, I will come back and show that. But otherwise, I'm just going to make all those connections, hook them up to that grounding block, and show you the finished product. So there's 3 sizes of these connectors. I have been using this large size because they hid all of this medium size underneath a bunch of the small size in the container. And I really should have been using the medium size, I believe. I will check that out, but that's what I think I should have been using. And I will use that from now on. I'm not going to go back and rework stuff that I've already done. Actually, I think that one might have been misplaced. Yeah, that one's misplaced too. So that's what happens when you pull it out and trust what they're showing you. There's the 3 holes. This is the one I've been using, and it's bigger than necessary, I believe. I believe I could have used that on the battery terminal. But as I said, it's not worth going back and rewiring everything. They've got these all mixed up. The big ones are in the same bin as the male spade connectors. So I better be diligent in searching for the ones I need, because they are not in there very well. At any rate, it looks like I can use this size to go onto that's the medium size. Looks like I can use that to go onto the battery post, and I can use the smaller size to go on the grounding block. I'm going to go check that out right now while I have these in my hand. These again are the heat shrink. So it just that is the small. It does fit onto the grounding block. And this is the medium. And yes, it goes over the bolt that goes through the battery terminal. So I should have been using these for all these connections. But They had them hidden. So enough for that. I'm going to shut off the video, wire up some grounds, and then show you the finished product. It'll be just stripping wire, crimping these connectors on, heat shrinking them over and over. So there's the finished battery compartment. I've got all of the hot wires feeding all the devices that I'm adding hooked up to this battery terminal. I'm going to get a dual post battery so that I can hook the original to the hot on the side and all the accessories on the top. So there's the negative battery cable, and then this is for my battery tender. It's got to be hooked up to both the positive and negative battery terminals. And then on this one I have hooked up the two sniper wires that they say they want all the way to the battery. Of course, the battery tender wire. And then the final one is my ground wire that I'm running just because I want to have a good ground anywhere in the car. So looks like pretty much that stuff's all out of the way. If I ever get an electric seat, I left the breaker in there. All I have to do is add that to the battery terminal and that will have power. Right now it's dead. But that would be an easy job to do if I decide to go that route. So that's it in the back. Now we're going to have to move forward. So I'm trying to protect my wires any place where there's a potential for it to rub on anything sharp. I'm not going to do the whole way because this stuff is really hard to get on. But what I've found is once you get it started, you just hold the bundle together and push the whole bundle through the slit. And that works better than anything I've tried. It isn't easy. This is, I bought heavy duty stuff because I heard complaints on reviews that some of the stuff was too thin and too flimsy. So I bought the twice as thick stuff, and the complaint about it was hard to work with. So I'm not surprised at this, but it is going on, and I will have it basically covering everything where there's a potential for some rubbing. Now this right here, there's a metal piece, but it's laying flat on it, so I'm not worried about that one. I am going to have to put some kind of adhesive on that grommet where it goes through the metal and the fiberglass there, because it does seem to be popping out. So I need to, I don't know, maybe some more TV. If you don't touch it, it doesn't seem to pop out, but when you play with the wires, it's popping out. So when I open up a tube of RTV, I'll probably just put it in there and leave it set so it dries, and it'll stay in place. So that's how far I've gotten so far with covering where it needs to be covered. And I am zip tying it together to make it a nicer bundle every place I need to. So I'm not going to record that, but I'll show you the results of the effort whenever I'm done. So it looks like my thought was justified in trying to make sure any place where that rubs against anything metal is covered with that wire loom, because as I was looking at it, and I'll see if I can show this to you. So that purple wire right there, not the purple and white, but the purple, has some wear through it all the way down to the wire. So I got some tape that came with some of the wires I bought. I'm going to use that to insulate that, if you can see it right there. And also this gray wire has a bare spot there, and this one here, and these are hot wires because they are two lights. This one here also has some bare wire. So we're going to take those up to prevent shorts in the future. Maybe I should back up that camera a little bit. But not exactly sure what they were rubbing on, but they certainly were rubbing. I'm surprised that they didn't cause a short and blow a fuse. When I say it, I should back the camera up, I should really do it, huh? So I think I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to actually install the air conditioner, because I've got to put a fuse block in here and a grounding block, and I don't know where I have room to do it without putting the air conditioner vents in. So that might be my next thing to do. These gray wires are to basically console lights. They're what light up the cigarette lighter, the ashtray, the gear shift lever, that type of thing. So I could probably just tape these two together, but I'm going to try to do it separate because the only one is damaged. The insulation's worn off. Not going to go through there, so I'm going to have to cut it off and try to push the tape through. And I just taped it to itself, so that's not going to work very well. A trick I heard somewhere, and I honestly don't remember where I heard it, and I've kind of started to do it, is to, when you're using electrical tape, use the biggest roll you can that will fit. And then as you work your way down, you'll get smaller and smaller spools. And by having those smaller spools, you can fit them into places that the big ones won't fit. So let's see how small a spool I have worked my way down to. So I've got 3 or 4 open spools. That's the smallest one I have, but maybe I can fit it through those 2 wires. I think that's probably actually good enough with the other one, but I'm just going to show you the difference when you've saved. Hopefully, I'm going to show you the difference when you've saved a smaller spool, that you can get into spaces that you can't get a full roll. So don't finish up that roll that you started. I did get it through once, so I'll do it again. Okay. So if I had tried to use that bigger roll, that would have never happened. And as I'm sitting here doing this, I see another one over here, black wire. It's probably a ground, so it's probably insignificant if it's bare, but that's bare too. There's another product out on the market too that you can use, and I have used it. The problem with it is you got to buy a can of it, and it tends to dry up once you open it, but it's liquid tape essentially. You just paint it on. It's got a little brush in the can, and you just put it on, let it dry, and it's insulated. So I'm Found another one. That was actually 2 spots on the same wire. I can't believe I wasn't blowing fuses here. You know what? Maybe it's because I rarely drove the car at night. Most of these are actually dash lights, as I've said. Well, I don't know at what point my battery ran out, but it ran out and shut off the camera. But I do know that I was finding several spots where the insulation was worn off of these wires, and they were all, for the most part anyways, wires that went to lights on the console. So I taped those up and said I was going to examine more wires and see what was going on. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. The other thing I was saying is that I picked up that hint somewhere about using the smallest or the largest roll you can use and then keeping the small ones so that when you get into a tight spot you can actually wrap it around whatever you need to wrap it around. So I think this can go here whenever it's in. And I've got just a few more wires that go up to where it goes through the dashboard. And I'm thinking maybe I should put those in a sleeve because I don't know I don't know what is going to be there. Whether it's going to be sharp, something that could cut a wire and have it short out. So I think I'm going to do that, and I don't know where I can mount my relay and my grounding block. So I have those wires up to here, which is probably a good place. I can certainly tap into those, and if necessary, when I'm tapping into those, I can peel them back through this this cable loom. So I am going to, and you won't be able to see that up underneath the dash, so I'm not going to video that. It's just more pushing wire looms over wires and keeping them safe from harm. So yesterday I got to a point where I needed to mount the relay and the remote fuse panel, and I didn't know where to mount it because I didn't have the dash together. I didn't know what potentially was going to interfere with it. So I went ahead and put the air conditioning unit in. that's all well and good, except I forgot that this wire, this black wire, is my ground that I want to run out to the engine compartment so that I put a grounding block there. The red one's fine because that's going to stop here in the interior. But now what I've done is I've made it much more difficult for me to get that wire up through those two big holes. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's going to be more of an issue. And on top of that, I remember, hey, the Sniper comes with a screen to program it with. So this is the screen, and they have it in the holder backwards so that it doesn't get messed up. That's what you program it with. I would like to have that on the inside of the car, and I didn't make any provision for that wire to go through the dashboard. So it's got, like one of the other wires, about a 1/2 inch connector that goes and plugs into the back of the actual throttle body portion of the Sniper system. So I've got to get that wire up through that grommet that I made as well. So that's going to set me back some time. My first instinct is to try to take one of the number 10 gauge wires that I cut off. It's long enough to reach down through that hole and get behind that air conditioning unit. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to pull both of those wires up through, hopefully not entangling them with any of that mess that's there, because as I've said before, I want to try to minimize the tangle, because I've seen a lot of cases where people have put stuff in and they've gone in and out of wires and just makes it a jumbled mess, and if you have to disconnect it or move it, it's all tangled with everything. I'd like to keep these separate if I can. So I'm going to try to drop a wire down through that, and hopefully it will come out on the floorboard side of the air conditioning unit. So I found what appears to be a pretty clear run. I inserted a wire from the engine compartment, aimed it down and towards the passenger side, because I felt that there, from feeling around the bottom of that air conditioning unit, that there was potential for there to be a clear run up that behind it, and I appear to have found it. It did take me a little time, and I first got it in the hole in the dash panel, and then I could reach it through the big hole in the dash, and I pulled it too far over. So anyways, it was caught between the firewall and the air conditioning unit, so I had to loosen the air conditioner unit to get it through. But now I have these two wires, and I've made them such that they're not going to interfere with anything. And I'm going to bend this wire back over itself to give it a better grip. I should have done that with both of them, but I didn't. And I'm going to tape the top kind of in a bullet so that it will funnel it towards the easiest path. And now I need to go get my unit. Where did I put it? There it is. My unit to program the sniper, because that's got to go through the dash as well. Fortunately, I put my dash panel in, somewhat anyways, last night. And darn it, they have that attached with a zip tie. I thought it was a little wire tie. So anyway, I gotta trying to maneuver my way around the tripod here without knocking it over. So need a pair of cutting pliers. So I would like to not have this open yet, but I got to get the wire through. So it's going to have to be what it is. There's plenty of cable on this, and after I get it through, I'll probably just put the unit up on top of the dashboard. Oh my God, I'm going to have to curl this up underneath to get it open. I don't know where in the world they think you're going to put this with 8 feet of cable, but that's what they've put on there. So, climbing back in, I'm going to take this wire to those 2 cables, and hopefully we'll be able to pull all this up through. I think it's a pretty big opening. I don't foresee too much of a problem. I don't want to make this very big. I'm trying to keep it as small as I can so that we can get it behind there. Okay. Oh, and if you were watching this all along, I made the comment about keeping multiple rolls of partially used tape so that you could get them in smaller places. So this was something where I had all the room in the world. I opened a brand new roll of tape to get it started on making it a small roll of tape that would fit elsewhere. So now I got to go to the engine compartment and yank on that wire, which I'm going to zoom it in a little bit here so you can see it pull. I may have to come over a couple times because it's got to go up behind that. I don't know how freely it will do that. Got my end of my wire. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, I probably need to go in there and see what's hanging it up because it is hung up. I never said this was going to be easy. Well, that's out of sight here, so I'm going to move the camera to the other side. So that wad of tape with all the connections in it was caught up on a little bit of the air conditioning unit, but look at that. We're through. I will tighten the air conditioner back up, and I think there's plenty of room back there, because as much as I could feel anyways, it was easy to just go right through. So the air conditioner's tight again. And one thing I know I want to do is, so I'm going to have to separate these, the wire for the ground, that's this one I believe. I want as much of it as possible out here in the engine compartment to give me leeway as to where I mount that grounding block. The other one, I need to make it reach to the back of the sniper system, which is probably more than enough, because I think there's a pigtail or a wiring harness that comes out of the sniper that has a foot or two of length to it. So I want to leave that most of that wire inside the passenger compartment so that I can use it freely. Okay, so that's about it on my my wire for the ground. Now, I left it whole because depending on where I decide I need to place that grounding block, I can cut that wire anywhere and I'll have plenty of room. This looks like I could probably mount it over here easily. So I'm going to undo that tape, and that is all of the wires that I need to go from the engine compartment into the passenger compartment. So I might stop the video for the wiring at this point because it's getting pretty long from what I can tell. And then I still have a lot of connecting to do on this side, but the connections I have to do on this side are ones that go to a particular unit. You know, it might be the CD ignition, it might be the sniper, it might be the fans, it might be the air conditioner compressor. There's a lot of things that need to be connected out here, but I will address those as I connect them. The only other thing that I might add to this video would be adding in the fuse boxes and the grounding bar in the interior of the car at least. So having run the sniper wire for the programming screen, that's going to be an issue with trying to run that neatly inside the car because the screen is like 3 inches across. So you're not going to cut a hole in anything to 3-inch screen through it. It just doesn't make sense. And already got it out here in the engine compartment. I suppose I could tie a string to it or something and run it, pull it back, and then run it through something and pull it back out into the engine compartment. But the problem is you got a good 1/2-inch connector on the end, so any hole that you drill to put that through has got to be at least a 1/2-inch, and that's not all that nice a situation as far as doing a neat job. So it may end up that that thing gets routed under the dashboard and maybe just, and I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe just a notch in the soft material part of the shift console to run it out right beside it. You just make a notch big enough for the wire and put the wire in it and then put the shift console on, or something like that. But it's a less than ideal situation in terms of trying to get that thing set up. And before I'm done here, maybe what I ought to do is check out how long that sniper lead is for that programmer and see if it's long enough to run it through the dashboard and have the connection on the inside and only connect it up when I actually want to use it. But with that, and I don't have the sniper unit here, I have it up the house. So I will have to look at that some more and try and decide where to go with that. So off camera, I decided to drill the hole in the plug. I can find out where it is. It's over there somewhere. I'm sorry, I tried to route the grounding bar wire through the plug, and I found out that I bought a different brand of wire and it's a different size and it won't go through that hole. So I'm going to have to enlarge that hole by risking my drilling through my finger with the drill. Just trying to make it as just big enough to get through. And then there is room in this plug. I should be able to route, doing it the way I did before, if I had to go up a 64th of an inch. But I can do for the sniper programming cable, I could do what I did for these cables right here, which go to the hot water shutoff for the air conditioner. I can drill a small hole and then make a slit and put it through. Only issue that I might have, well, it won't be an issue, but the only consideration is depending on whether I'm leaving this cable into the engine compartment or whether I'm taking the cable from the sniper and routing it down into the passenger compartment. I might need a slightly larger hole to do it from the engine compartment to the passenger compartment, because the plug that's on the one I put up today is the male side, so the female side would of necessity be bigger, so it might require a bigger hole. So I'm not going to do anything with that hole till I get a chance to look at that, and then if I decide that there's enough cable there to make that connection inside, I think that's what I'm going to do, as long as I can get to it, because you have to be able to get to it once you put it inside there, otherwise you can't disconnect it anyway. Because there's very little storage inside the Corvette and very little places to mount things. So I may decide that that programmer gets tucked away in the storage compartment and I only brought out whenever I want to change something. But that's it for now for that.